We are on the clock with our 5th and 6th round picks in a DraftKings $555 draft. We got off to a hot start, a beautiful team. And now we're getting into the middle rounds, trying to make our way to $1 million winning team. And we're going to talk through our 5th round pick, which is a little bit more straightforward, and a 6th round pick, which is a doozy. We're going to figure out how to land on the right guy here in the 5th and 6th round to build out this superstar squad in a DraftKings high stake draft. Let's do it.
3, 2, 1, liftoff.
All right, Silas, we're pulling double duty. B. Kurt's taking care of babies. Trev is probably lifting weights or whatever it is that he does, with his life. But we are back on the clock, or sort of back on the clock in the 5th, 6th round, and we have built out an amazing team so far here in the DraftKings $555 Millie Maker. For anyone that you're watching this, the first video, we have already released 2 different videos in this series where we are making 2 selections on every single video. And the 4 of us, myself, Silas, B. Kurt, and Trev, kind of talking through our thought process, debating, discussing. So far, it's been a little bit straightforward. We've kind of all liked a lot of the same guys or the same guy, and come to basically the same conclusion on each one of those picks. In the first one of this video that we're recording today, we had a pretty similar process, but here in the 6th round, which we'll get to in just a second, is not quite so straightforward on this team for the first time through 6 picks. So really quickly, I'm gonna run down the team, and like I said, if you have not watched the first 2, this will be the team, but you can also go to our YouTube channel, Spike Week on YouTube, and find, or you can listen to the podcast, the audio version, and watch our rounds 1 and 2 and rounds 3 and 4 picks. But so far, we drafted out of the 108 and got really lucky and got Tyreek Hill at the 108, came back around in the 2nd round and took Garrett Wilson. Then in the 3rd round, we took Breece Hall. And in the 4th round, Deebo Samuel falls back to us in the 4th round. So all of those picks where there was a little bit of discussion about Breece, but some of the players who we might have considered other than Breece were kind of gone by that point. And even Breece was probably a little bit straightforward. But Tyreek Hill, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, and Deebo Samuel, we come on the clock here in the 5th round. And I'll kick it over to Silas right away to kind of talk through just some of the players that were on the board, and ultimately the player that really we all kind of co-signed as the guy we probably just had to take here in the 5th.
Yeah, so it was really a discussion between 2 guys. We had actually brought them up in the round 4 for our round 4 pick. I brought up Joe Mixon, and then Birdie brought up Justin Fields, both of which we had literally thought there was probably a 2% chance that either of them would get back to us in the 5th, and they both were there. So we were kind of talking it through, because we had Breece Hall. It was kind of like a lot easier for us to just grab an elite quarterback as the QB7 that potentially has QB1 upside. So we were pretty much all on board. Grabbed Fields here. The sad part was DJ Moore went a pick before us, so we couldn't kind of hope that DJ Moore fell to this turn. And we were actually hoping Kyle Pitts would fall back to this pick, but he actually went 1 pick before us again. So we kind of running low on our luck, where, we're getting our ADP value. We're the fallers that we've wanted and kind of have dreamed of. Have kind of been there pretty much every way. But now not anymore. Round 6 is going to be a fun one.
100%. I think it'd be easy for us to sit here and make up things that we were discussing really at almost all of these picks. Like I said, Tyreek, it's just a slam dunk. Garrett Wilson, there's a little bit of a debate, but I think ultimately Garrett Wilson made the most sense. And then same thing kind of with Breece, Deebo. Again, you can go back and watch the last video and see kind of how we landed on Deebo. And then as Silas kind of outlined, Justin Fields being really the last of the elite tier of quarterback. I understand if you wanted to say Justin Herbert or something like that, but with the rushing upside that Fields brings, newly added weapon of DJ Moore, last of a tier, around plus past ADP We know what can happen with quarterbacks on DraftKings. It just made too much sense. And so we did take Justin Fields in the 5th round. We come back around and everything Silas mentioned, so George Kittle and Kyle Pitts go off the board there. Joe Mixon, another guy we would have considered, goes off the board there. I really like J.K. Dobbins as well. He goes off the board there. So it does kind of dry up some of the names I think that would have been the most interesting. Maybe some of us might have pounded the table the most for those tight ends and those running backs. We do have an anchor in Breece Hall, so I feel really comfortable about any direction that we go. Obviously, we have the elite quarterback, so I'm not particularly interested in any of the quarterbacks, but I'm mostly interested to hear what you're kind of thinking amongst running back, wide receiver, and tight end, because we were discussing a little bit briefly before we started recording that this is the area of the draft where I don't want to say things like ADP value don't matter, because of course that's not true, but this is what I would call a really wide open flat tier from the guys at the top of the board all the way down for honestly more than a round, maybe multiple rounds. We could make case for guys that are going in the 7th round, 8th round of drafts that are not that different than the air quotes best available player on the board here. So I'm very curious to hear kind of who stands out to you, because I have some guys who I definitely do like, but I don't have anyone like through 5 rounds. All of the guys that we literally all 5 of the first picks were like, I'm like, no, that's the guy. Like, I'm going to pound the table for that guy. Here is the first spot of the draft where I don't feel that way, and I could go many different directions.
Yeah, so like I know we kind of have talked about in the past. I feel like we're at the point where running back gets a little bit stagnant, right? You're kind of playing for floor here. They do have some question marks, but I don't really see any of these guys really catapulting or really separating from this group. It kind of feels like we're in that RB dead zone. I know in the Bulldog draft we took Cam Akers because he can be a full 3-down workhorse. He's kind of the only one that is probably different compared to everybody else. But just based on who is still available, and with this being full point PPR, I know there are a decent amount of pass catchers. I'm more willing to punt off running backs, being as we have Breece Hall. So kind of where I'd be looking at is a wide receiver. Tight end's kind of flat for me. I'm not really feeling Goddard. I do really like Waller, but I feel like it's too much of a reach. I think there's a potential that he could come back, probably next round. So I'd be personally looking at wide receiver. Obviously, we're not looking at quarterback because we took Fields, right? Just makes too much sense. So yeah, you're looking at kind of who has the most upside here, right? And the 2 names really stick out to me. It's really Kadarius Toney and Jackson Smith-Njigba. I honestly think Jackson Smith-Njigba is one of, if not the most talented wide receiver we've seen in the last 3 or 4 drafts. Like, his talent level is up there with Chase and Justin Jefferson. And I know there's a crap ton of target competition there in Seattle, but talent he's going to command targets. He's going to be open. And honestly, I don't see having Lockett and DK as a big negative because, he's going to be in single coverage. And if they do put a safety over the top, then, the offense is just going to be really damn good. They're going to keep all 3 wide receivers on the field. And they should be scoring a hell of a lot of points as long as Geno doesn't revert to, the Geno of the Jets. And we kind of talked about it in the last video. It's pretty much leverage on everybody else. Each of those guys could go off any which week. It's kind of what we're seeing. And then Kadarius Toney, obviously.
It's a good point with the Niners. The Seahawks were another example that we mentioned as like a manufactured leverage thing. We're not expecting, again, from a season-long perspective, drafting JSN in your home league and slotting him into your wide receiver 3 or flex spot or something does feel a little uncomfortable, week 1 or whatever. But that's the great thing about best ball. We're drafting 20 players. We don't have to do that. We can bet on his talent and bet on the fact that he's just going to have a bunch of good weeks. We don't have to pick when they happen.
Exactly. And then the other one I brought up was Kadarius Toney. We obviously got the DeAndre Hopkins news this morning, which is honestly pretty damn good for Kadarius Toney. I know obviously having Hopkins would be good because it would, again, open up the field for him, kind of allow him to play more of like a all over let him play in the slot, let him play outside, kind of play that jet motion type role. And obviously having a more vertical threat would just kind of open up the field. They'd probably have to roll a safety over to Hopkins, leaving him in single coverage, which, he's going to win 9 times out of 10. He still is probably or projectably the wide receiver one for Patrick Mahomes. I know they didn't use him a ton last year. He didn't seem like he was fully healthy, which has been obviously a recurring theme. But you got to bet on talent, right? It kind of goes to the JSN thing. Like Kadarius Toney is debatably one of the most talented wide receivers in the world if he can stay on the field, which obviously is a huge if. But another year in the system, he obviously was traded right around the deadline, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Right around the deadline. He was only there for 10 weeks or so. It didn't seem like he was ever on the same page. They kind of used him as a gadget player. So hoping a full offseason would kind of turn him into, the player that they want, kind of make him Tyreek Hill, kind of use him in that way. So that's kind of where I'd be looking. I'd be looking at those two.
I totally agree. I think it's funny because we were recorded. If you've watched the videos, we drafted a Bulldog team on Underdog, which is a $500 similar in terms of buy-in stakes, high stakes tournament on Underdog, but it's also a very different tournament. And a lot of the times we also got off to a very good start and built a good team that we all really loved there. And a lot of the sentiment and conversation was around, look, we're in a good spot. We're drafting the structure that we like. We're getting a lot of the players that we like, some fallers, etc. So let's not fuck this up. The size of the Bulldog is tiny for a little over 400 people, whereas this is 5,200 people. So they are both high stakes tournaments, but they are very different high stakes tournaments. The advancement structure here, as we've outlined, particularly in the first video, feels easy, air quotes easy, but there's still 5,200 teams in this tournament, and it is still very, very, very top heavy. Very, very top heavy. $1 million to first place out of a $2.6 million prize pool. With that being said, we're already very strong at wide receiver. So swinging on players like you just mentioned that have this home run upside, but definitely have a low floor, in particular Kadarius Toney, is something I would prefer to do here because there's just so many more teams we need to beat, and we really want to finish at the top. Not that we don't want to finish at the top of the Bulldog, of course we do, but we don't need as many things to go right from an upside perspective in a tournament like that as we do on here. Plus, on DraftKings, compared to Underdog, they're 20 rounds versus 18 rounds. It doesn't feel like a lot of a big difference, particularly because you're adding on some just like scratch off lottery tickets at the end, but it's a big difference. That's 2 extra players that you get to add to your team, particularly in full PPR. There's really ways to manufacture points out of those extra people. We've drafted an elite quarterback, so we're really only going to draft 2 of those guys. And so I really like swinging here. So Silas didn't mention, and I also probably really would not have mentioned, the Chris Godwin, Tyler Lockett, Mike Evans, Michael Pittman grouping that you see at the top of the player board on wide receiver. Chris Godwin is one of my favorite players, if not my favorite player in the NFL. I think he's an outstanding football player. I think Tyler Lockett is very good. Mike Evans is a good football player, but Michael Pittman's a good football player. But I think what they bring from an upside perspective is not the same, not even probably in the same stratosphere of what Jackson Smith-Njigba and Kadarius Toney bring from a ceiling perspective. And for me, those are the 2 guys that absolutely stand out that I would really hone in on those 2. I also think it's possible that someone from this group falls to the next pick that we would make. And you mentioned Darren Waller. I would be very interested in Darren Waller. I don't think we want to take him here over one of the wide receivers, but I think there's a decent chance that one of this kind of collection of guys we would consider here, plus Darren Waller, might be there at the next pick. So I think given that we've soaked up all this ADP value, we've got a really strong team, we can kind of take this swing. Sometimes on Underdog, with the way the wide receivers play out, you don't have that luxury all the time, right? You're drafting your wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4, and you're like, God my wide receivers still aren't that good. I need this guy to be good. So you say, okay, I'm just going to take Tyler Lockett because he's good. I know there's like a relative floor there. Kadarius Toney's floor is he's just a gadget player. Jackson Smith-Njigba's floor is he's a slot receiver playing 50% of snaps, getting 5 targets a game. That's not great. But the upside, Jackson Smith-Njigba and Kadarius Toney are the only 2 guys in this range that have, I'm a second round pick next year in their range of outcomes. It's really not particularly close. Kadarius Toney could be the wide receiver 1 on the Chiefs, scoring a bunch of touchdowns. He's probably going to score touchdowns even as a gadget player. And now you add on the fact that an offseason, as Silas outlined, to grow with Patrick Mahomes and be in the system. They traded for him. He's a former first-round pick. I know he has flaws as a wide receiver, but guess what? Patrick Mahomes covers up a whole shit ton of flaws when you're a wide receiver catching passes for him. Just get open short, catch the ball, let the human joystick cook. Jackson Smith-Njigba, as Silas outlined, is probably still my favorite over Kadarius Toney because I think, as you said, if there is a superstar NFL football player out of this group, he's the best bet to make out of all of that. And Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf being there is fine. You know who is a superstar and also has other good wide receivers on his team? Jamar fucking Chase is a really good wide receiver and has really good wide receivers on his team. But when you're a star, you're a star. And so the only reason we're getting JSN at these costs, pick 60, 70, whatever, is because people are projecting volume and they don't know what to do because they're all good. And when that happens, that is a feeding frenzy, in my opinion. That's where you win. That's where, you know what, I'm not saying he is this player, but you know what happened? You know, the last time this happened at one people leagues, Cooper Kupp. People said, Kupp, Woods, right? There's Higbee at tight end. There's Van Jefferson as the ancillary guy. I don't know. I don't know who the guy is. But when you're a star, you're a star. And I want to bet on the guys that can be stars. And that there is a floor with JSN. He's not going to be nothing. He's not going to be nothing. And so there's that one player. So you get the same upside with JSN and Toney, like give or take the same upside with JSN and Toney. And JSN does provide a little bit of a safety blanket just with, if JSN had been able to come out after his sophomore season, right, without all the COVID and the injury and all that kind of stuff, we'd be thinking about him very differently, in my opinion. Certainly if he landed somewhere else, this guy would be a 3rd round pick. He would be going in that DK Metcalf area of the draft if he had just so happened to have landed somewhere else. And so I mentioned several weeks back now, but I was like, we get to this range of the draft and I'm just like, I don't love any of these guys. Why don't I just take the superstar rookie who's like really awesome and just kind of let the room give me this potential? Like why can't he be where Stephon Diggs and AJ Brown and CeeDee Lamb? Like, what is the difference between Jackson Smith-Njigba and CeeDee Lamb? CeeDee Lamb got catapulted up to the 1st round. Why can't he be that guy next year? I don't really see why. And so I know it's a couple pick reach, but like I don't care about that. And so I do like Kadarius Toney, and I'm not like pounding the table saying no Godwin, no Lockett or anything like that. But I just think he makes too much sense. We have a really strong team. He brings a requisite floor, in my opinion, but the upside is just insane. So there's my, long-winded JSN kind of pounding the table. Trev joins us here. Have you had a chance to digest the board? What are you thinking?
A little bit. I just caught him at the end of the conversation, and I agree with the Njigba statements and Toney. Those are definitely the 2 upside guys here. I have one guy who I see in a similar tier, probably, in my opinion, a bit higher floor, maybe not the same elite ceiling with Addison, just because we've seen the amount. I think Thielen had the 2nd most routes in the league last year as a washed 31-year-old.
Yep.
I think Addison, he's small. He's not an alpha. He's got Jefferson there. I think he can just go right into that role, and they're going to be throwing the piss out of the ball just every game. I don't think their defense, it might not be worse. I don't think it's going to be much better. I think it's going to be pretty below average still. So I think Addison is a similar guy, but just when it comes to being a prospect, JSN hasn't beat there. So I think if we're just saying, 90th percentile, they're just balling out, and Njigba he probably beats him with ceiling.
I will just add, if there's one of them that makes it back to us at the next pick, Addison is a better bet probably to make it back to us at the next pick. So if we're splitting hairs, if we loved both of them, I think Addison has a better chance to make it back. And I like him as well. Silas, what do you think about Addison, and then any other names that you wanted to throw out or add on to the JSN Tony discussion?
Yeah, no, I definitely like Addison. There's a real chance that he is the number 2 and TJ Hawkinson's getting overdrafted. Like he could just be used in more of like that mid-tier depth. I mean, Adam Thielen was terrible last year, man. Like you could see the regression all over the place. So just injecting like a body that can actually beat man coverage and get open in zone, might actually start getting peppered by Kirk Cousins. And, that was used by TJ Hawkinson because he was such a big body. But I don't think his first read is inside. It's typically outside the numbers. So, Addison could be that guy this year. But I do agree. I think he would be there next round. So that would be my splitting the hairs. With how people have kind of drafted and, how you typically see people who grab a lot of running backs in those mid tiers, they want safer plays at wide receiver. So, you're going to see the Godwins, the Evans, the Lockett's, even Michael Pittman kind of go off, pretty quickly over these next, 5, 6, 7 picks. Even if there are a couple running backs that, might entice them as well. So I feel like Addison will probably be there next round, and he might even be there the round after, just because, DK is weird, man. Like they aren't really, they don't love the shiny new toys. They like proven projection, as seen by, what was his name? David Montgomery going in third round. I'd be on JSN or Tony. My only counterpoint to JSN is I know he has the elite ceiling. I honestly think Kadarius Toney might have a higher ceiling than JSN. I know his talent is obviously a lot greater, but attaching a wide receiver 1 to Patrick Mahomes is, the sky's the limit. We literally saw Tyreek Hill being drafted in the top 6 picks for 3 years consecutively. If they use him in that way, obviously they don't share the same skill set. Tyreek is, a million miles faster and can actually run routes, whereas Kadarius Toney is just kind of like you kind of got to get him in motion. Yeah, you kind of got to get him in motion and manufacture touches. But I do like that Andy Reid and Matt Nagy will find ways to design touches for Kadarius Toney, and they might just do that more often this year. Mm-hmm. So my lean would probably be on Toney. I mean, you can see that I have 24% compared to 8% for JSN. I love JSN. I think he's my highest owned receiver on Underdog. But yeah, that's just where I'd be going.
Yeah.
Do you have Trev, you have a preference?
I was going to say to the Toney point, don't boo me off stage, but I think Kelsey's 34. At some point it's possible he may.
I agree.
He may start to regress, and he's still going to be out there for 80% of the routes. But if he's just getting targeted a little less, they're still going to be probably the highest pass rate team in the league, close to it. If Toney does earn that role, which he's beating out Sky Moore, just a living legend, in Rashee Rice. Like, come on now, like it's not that hard to see a picture. So I'm really close on all these guys. Like you can paint a picture where any of them ball out and they end up as a 1-2 turn pick next year. I think I'd be Toney over Njigba, just if we're just showing for pure upside, which is kind of the goal here with how our receivers look and just the value we can probably get later. I think Toney wouldn't hurt, but they're all just neck and neck.
What pick is our next pick, Silas? I'm just trying to if we're really gonna let's pipe dream a second. JSN does fall on DraftKings.
Yeah.
Been 8, so I don't even know.
We got 14 picks.
So he would have to fall
pick
5
80.
or 6 picks.
That's 5 picks.
I mean, we were just talking about how Addison is not the type of player that sometimes, in particular in the 5-5-5 room, like you mentioned, where the people really want to lock in the Lockett's, right? People are going to take Lockett over JSN. I'm not saying that's right or wrong or whatever, but I'm saying we view things a little differently. We just mentioned 3 players that a lot of people probably don't like or may not draft. Kadarius Toney, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Addison, because they're very uncertain players. It's very hard to project, right? And if you do a projection, they actually don't project that well. They project quite poorly, actually, as opposed to these other guys. And so I think it would be fair to say, if we wanted to try to get two of these guys, Toney is the guy who is probably not going to fall back. I mean, the guy after us is certainly in need of wide receivers and has Patrick Mahomes, and he picks twice before we get back on the clock. He's a very prime Toney candidate. No one is really a prime JSN candidate. And I guess the 101 you could say is a Addison candidate, but he's also already taken Lamar Jackson. It's not like it's not like just because you have Jefferson, you need to take Addison. And so I actually like this kind of tiebreaker a lot of the times more than like a lot of the other micro levers we like to pull, is like, well, if we like 2 or 3 of these guys, which one could fall back and not take that guy? I don't think Toney will fall back. I'm not sure. I would bet against JSN falling back, but man, I've seen a lot of DK boards, and JSN is a faller more frequently than I ever would have guessed 6 months ago or whatever. And so I think that is fair. I just want to bring up really quickly, people probably like, you scoffed over Cam Akers around past ADP or whatever, and Silas mentioned that you guys took him in your Bulldog draft. First, I will say we took him in the 7th round. Might have even been 8th in the Bulldog draft. It was a very different cost. We had a 0 running back team. He was our first running back, correct? I believe in the Bulldog. And it's not that he's not a good PPR back. He's fine in PPR, but it's just a little bit of a different scenario. On Underdog, he goes much later, and so it's a little bit of a different thing. And I think, obviously all those wide receivers were off the board when we were on the clock to take Cam Akers in the Bulldog. So to kind of wrap it up, honestly, I'm down for all of these guys. I do think it should be probably Toney versus JSN here, and see if Addison will come back. Let him be one of the guys that could potentially fall back to us. His ADP is pretty close to our next pick, so he's definitely a better bet to make it there. I do think I prefer in a coin flip JSN over Toney, but I mean, I like Toney too. I know the industry doesn't, so we're gonna get scoffed at for taking the jet sweep player in the 6th round or whatever. But I think, dude, it's hard to even like elaborate. $1 million out of $2.6 million in the total prize pool goes to first place. Like, this isn't just like, sometimes we laugh about how top heavy tournaments are, and we talk about, oh, look at all this money in the top 10. That's what we'll do and BBM's very, very top heavy, but we'll say, oh, the top 10 is like 50% of the prize pool. It's like, no, like 40% of the prize pool goes to first place in this. So I do want to swing for the fences. I do think both of those guys are home run swings. I think Kadarius Toney is probably the biggest home run swing that exists in best ball this year. So I'm comfortable with that. I do personally lean a little bit to JSN, but I'll kind of let you guys put your votes in and we can see where we land.
Yeah, I think Toney just has no chance to make it back. And when it's that close for me, I'll say, okay, JSN probably doesn't make it back either, but I'll take the chance. And also to the Akers point, I always mention like, oh yeah, we can get value. It's drafting, we can get value. But at some point in the draft, the receivers don't have the upside that Toney has, right? Like, it's like, cool, I got Tyler Boyd 20 picks past ADP. Maybe he's a wide receiver 3, we're saying, okay, maybe we're getting the wide receiver like 6 overall here. There's a chance, right. There's a possibility.
Right, so, a first-round pick. These guys could be first-round picks next season. As you mentioned with Travis Kelce, I always think that's important to talk about with Kadarius Toney. It's a little bit of nuance because where you go next season isn't always 100% because of what you did last year, right? Bijan goes in the first round. He's a rookie, whatever. But, like, if Travis Kelce is still, like, good Travis Kelce, but not the absolute superstar Travis Kelce that we've seen before, the opportunity that exists on the best offense on the planet with the best quarterback of all time is like, you can't even like really put a number on that, dude. It's like, it's fucking insane. MVS, let's walk it through just super quickly. MVS is a role player. He's going to play on the outside because he blocks, because they got a bunch of little dudes. He's going to block and run some down the field routes, right? Sky Moore's probably competing with Richie James for the slot role. Sky's a little guy. Richie James a little guy. Richie James for sure a slot receiver. I think Sky's best potential is that in the slot. On the other outside is probably where you have Tony competing with Rashee Rice and Justin Watson and Justin Ross. And like, so I think there's more to his potential role than maybe he's given credit for, because it's really easy to dunk on him and say, look, he didn't even play in the playoff run last year. He's been hurt all the time. And I get all of that. But like, if there's a guy here, JSN is somewhat in that camp, but JSN's going to be playing with DK Metcalf next year. Like, it's a fact. Like, so it's tough for him to get to the first round. If Travis Kelce regresses and Kadarius Toney is this first round player who's demanding real targets on the Chiefs, why is he worse than the guys that go in the first round as wide receivers? And that's the guy we want. That's what wins you $1 million in this tournament. It could fail, but I don't care about failing. I care about trying to win $1 million.
I mean, Kadarius Toney won me $75,000.
Yeah,
I freaking love the man. Like, there's no doubt about it. I think if you're looking at it in that upside, like, JSN provides leverage, off everybody else. Whereas, and that might be crucial going into the playoff weeks. And he's kind of like a big win, small miss player. And Kadarius Toney's kind of the opposite. Like, he's a huge hit, huge miss.
Yeah.
And potentially, theoretically, he could tank our season. But it's a 6th round player as our 4th wide receiver with so much upside that we could literally blow everybody out of the water based on how we're drafting. So that's kind of why I lean to Toney. It's, he's the type of player that, he might have a super high advance rate, but he's not going to be paired with Debo, Garrett Wilson, Tyreek Hill, who are guys that can go for 35 points in any given week and help us to advance to the Millie week, where we're actually hosting the trophy at the end of the year.
And this is, you want to talk about upside as a team. Think about when the upside came. Well, Tyreek just needs to be Tyreek, which Tyreek is going to be Tyreek. Spoiler alert. Tyreek's only flaw is Tua. Tyreek's flaw is not Tyreek. It's just Tua's brain. Garrett Wilson's going to be a certain level of good. We just want him to be, top 5 pick next year. Good, ideally. But he's going to be he comes with the floor as well. Brees is a total home run swing with a certain level of floor relative to running backs. Debo is the, best player, him and CMC, the best player on an awesome offense. Like, think about showing up to the playoffs with Tyreek Hill as the, Tyreek Hill had the highest target share in the NFL. It was Cooper Kupp and Tyreek Hill. People forget this because Justin Jefferson was so good and Jamar Chase is amazing. But the guys demanding the most targets were Cooper Kupp and Tyreek Hill last season for the majority of the year. Obviously Kupp got hurt and Tyreek had Tua injury issues, which kind of changed some things. You show up with Aaron Rodgers' best 2 players, right? Garrett Wilson and Brees Hall. Tyreek Hill, I don't want to say the best wide receiver in the NFL, but certainly the most dangerous. Opposing defenses fear Tyreek Hill more than they fear anyone on the planet, including Justin Jefferson. Debo Samuel, who's one we talked about in the last video, one of the best actual football players on the planet. Justin Fields could absolutely break fantasy if the team is not complete dog shit around him like they were last year. And then you say, let's toss Patrick Mahomes' number 1 weapon onto this. That's what we're talking. That's the ceiling that we're talking about showing up to week 17 with. Will it hit? I don't fucking know. No one knows. But the ceiling case is through 6 picks. Through 5 picks, our team is loaded as it is. No one would even really argue that. Through 6 picks, we could have the rest of the shit doesn't matter on this team. That's legitimately possible if it hits. And that's what I want. I want that. And that Chris Godwin doesn't give you that. Tyler Lockett doesn't give you that. Michael Pittman doesn't give you that, right? JSN might not give you that, but Kadarius Toney does.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, I sent somebody a picture of our first 5 picks, and he said, I'm not entering the 5-5-5 because you guys already won.
Certainly don't draft Tyreek Hill in the 5-5-5 because you don't have the best Tyreek Hill team. I'll tell you that much.
So
anything else? Just while we put a bow on it, is Waller something we should consider? Anything like that we just want to toss out there before we do make the Tony pick?
I think we don't need to think about tight end as much. I personally really like Waller. I think he's going to be the wide receiver one. They kind of got him to be their big wide receiver acquisition because the Giants kind of obviously need one. But kind of looking ahead, I mean, 4 teams already have a tight end. So probably not going to see them kind of grab one. So you're kind of really only looking at 8 picks of potentially grabbing 2 tight ends that could potentially be tight end one in Goddard and Waller. Obviously, Goddard has a higher ADP, so he's probably going to go first. And a lot of these teams need wide receivers, so they're going to be trying to grab those really safe guys that we're kind of avoiding right now.
Particularly the 102. He needs a lot of things, but he definitely needs some wide receivers. Trev, what do you think? Waller, anything else? Anything else?
I absolutely love Waller. I think he's my most drafted tight end. He's up there with like Pitts and Chig for me. I just think he could be. They had him in a shit role with like a.
Gotta get a fucking Chig reference.
Always, every day, man. But he had like a 13 ADOT last season and was coming off injury. Like it was just ridiculous. I don't know what they were doing with him in Las Vegas, but I think he's gonna be great. But despite me saying that Kadarius Toney kind of gives me Travis Fulgham vibes, just that little short stint of being elite. I think he's definitely just the most dangerous player on the board, and out of everyone left, he could just absolutely dominate. So I think he's the pick for our team, and we just wait and hope that we get one of our tight ends later, or we get a receiver that falls.
I love it. I think we've landed on it, and I mean, I will say, some people would dislike some play and do dislike players like Kadarius Toney, but I don't think you can argue with through 6 picks what we set out to do has basically been achieved. We said this specific tournament is so top heavy. It's not that small. I mean, 5,200 people is not like tiny. We understand the advancement structure is a little bit easier, but it's not like a slam dunk. Like you do still have to finish top 2 out of your league and then beat 5 other teams and then beat 4 other teams. And they're all going to be, spoiler alert, really good because they made the playoffs. It's not like a complete slam dunk. And then it is a 29-person final where we want to get at the top of that 29-person. Like we want to get first, but even then we want it like it's 150K to second, right? Like it falls off very fast. We want to get very much as close to the top as we can. We set out to swing for $1 million, to swing for this. And we did it in a way that we didn't have to do anything stupid. We took the best player. We took fallers and we took the best player on the board through 5 rounds. And then we just decided in the 6th round pick to take a swing. And it wasn't a reach. It wasn't anything crazy. He goes around here and there's obviously an upside case. And so just to read it off for everybody, if you're tuning in, partway through, or you fast forwarded because you didn't want to hear us talk about Kadarius Toney for 30 minutes, through 6 picks in the DraftKings $555 Millie Maker tournament. Justin Fields at quarterback, Breece Hall at running back, Tyreek Hill, Garrett Wilson, Deebo Samuel, and Kadarius Toney at wide receiver. I can't really dream of a much better start. I mean, we could quibble, whatever the hell the word is, over a couple of little things. But man, this is pretty fun. I'm pretty excited for this team. I'm excited to see how it goes. Any last things before we sign off, Silas?
No, just if you go to fast forward to week 17, and you saw this grouping of players, and you saw that you have dropped 200 points in a week in DK, like you would not be surprised. They all have that insane single game ceiling upsides that I keep talking about. So like I'm in heaven right now. This team's freaking awesome.
Trev?
Yeah, I feel just the absolute upside we have at every position. It's like you can make a case for all these guys being in the first round next year. You can make a case for all these guys being the guy you need in week 16, week 17, weird combos where, okay, this guy doesn't go off in 15 or 16. We're the only one out of 29 who have him, and he just explodes. So I just think the potential we have is just it's absolutely amazing. Obviously, there's reasons that guys are going into 4th, 5th, 6th rounds. They're not perfect, but I don't think that matters too much for how we build our team. We're going to be good.
Boom. You guys both nailed it. We'll be back in a couple of days. Sometimes the picks fly off the board really quickly. Sometimes they take a little bit of time, but sometime about every 2 days or so, we'll post another video, and make sure you subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on this team, which is going to win $1 million in 7 months or whatever it is. 7 months from now, we're going to win about $1 million. We'll be back in a couple of days with round 7 and 8 in the DK 555. Peace.
Woo! Those were some spicy takes. Want to stay up to date with all of the other spicy takes we're going to have over here at Spike Week? Why don't you press that subscribe button below? If you turn notifications on, we draft a team, boom, you know about it. We have another spicy take, boom, you know about it. You can be there. You can draft with us. You want to stay up to date? That's how you do it. All right, we'll catch you later next time here at Spike Week.